Good afternoon. I hope you're keeping well, and welcome to another edition of Careers and Coffee. I'm Kieren Buxton, an enterprise coordinator covering East Norfolk, Broadland and West Norfolk, and I'll be hosting today's episode in place of Jordan. Today, our guest is George Hinds, who is a private client consultant at Beckett, who will be talking about his experiences in the finance industry and the world of investment. That's enough from me. Let's welcome today's guest. Hi, George.
Hi, Kieren. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Thanks for agreeing to be part of Careers and Coffee. How are you keeping?
Yeah, really well, thank you, in these strange times. And the weather's taken a dip as well. So we've lost the sunshine and we've got loads of rain and cold. So, yeah,
Yeah, it
keeping
seems.
from that.
Although it looks sunny in other parts of the country, but let's not talk about that. So we'll get started as it's quite an action-packed episode. So just to start off, as I mentioned in the intro, you are a private client consultant. So it'd be great to hear a bit more about what the role entails, what a typical day looks like, and just a bit more about the organisation you work for.
Okay. So, yeah, I work for Beckett Financial Services. We're a firm of independent financial advisors. So what that means is we've been helping our clients look after their money for over 30 years now. And we're a chartered firm, which is something that most firms like ours don't achieve because it requires strict standards. My role is an really interesting one, and it's varied. No 2 days are really the same. So a typical day could involve seeing a client, having a breakfast meeting with the client, going into the office to type up notes following that meeting, discussing the case and moving it forward with the rest of the team. And then while I'm in the office, it's good to review existing cases that we're working on, managing workload, reading through technical notes, cash flow forecasts for clients, and then going to see another client in the afternoon or going networking. And in between all of that, there's phone calls, there's emails, and they could be.
That sounds really action-packed.
Yeah, so clients, people, providers that we work with. So yeah, it's no 2 days are the same, really.
That sounds really interesting. And I'm sure you're going to know that I'll probably throw in this question, but how has it all been affected by the pandemic, with COVID-19 and everything? There must have been a real change in the way of working.
Yeah, like most businesses, we've made loads of changes in the way we communicate and see clients and how we transact business with them. So we now use Zoom a lot more, Microsoft Teams to have meetings. And this has meant not only educating myself and us as a business, educating ourselves on how to use it and being familiar with it, but clients as well, because as you can imagine, the demographic that we deal with, mainly aged 60 plus, they may not be familiar with the technology and they've had to embrace it as well. As a business, we've also had to make adjustments. So forms that would normally require clients to sign with a pen, where possible, we'll get these signed electronically now using a program called DocuSign. And we're now encrypting emails, which enables us to send sensitive information. So instead of sending it out in the post, we'll send it electronically. And we're also using the cloud to save files, so it's easier to access information remotely. So we don't need to come to the office, and everything's available on our laptops.
Yeah, no, that sounds like you've made some real changes and really quickly as well. So it sounds really good as an organisation you've adapted, and it could be a way moving forward looking at a paperless option as well, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly something we're looking at, and we are looking to get rid of paper files for sure. That's definitely on the agenda because you just don't need them. You don't need to print all that stuff out, keep it in a file, and then store it in a room where you've got it all saved in the cloud. So, yeah, it's
brilliant. No, that sounds really good, and well done on overcoming the challenges. Just a bit of a change in topic. So I believe that you've changed your job recently. So what were you doing previously, and what's the change been like? Has it been a big change?
So I was previously a financial advisor, and then the opportunity to join Beckett's arose, and it was really exciting to be part of the team and being part of the future success of the company. I mean, it's a fantastic company to work for, even in the short period I've been here. Everyone is so friendly, very accommodating, but it has been a bit strange starting a new role in these times.
So when did you start, George? Sorry.
This is week 4.
Wow! Oh, wow! Yeah, really new then.
Yeah, so really new. And yeah, it's been a bit strange starting a new role now. Not just because it's sort of been remote. Some of it's been remote. I'm in the office today, as you can see from the background behind me. But the office has had a bit of a skeleton staff just because of social distancing and all the different rules and how many people you can have in close proximity. So some of the people I work with, I've not met face to face. We've been meeting online via Zoom. And we sit so far apart in the office. So it's quite a big office. And there's lots of empty space. So apart from that, it's been absolutely fine. But yeah, it's just been a bit strange.
I'd imagine. So have you, before being a finance advisor as well, have you been in any other industries? Have you worked in previously?
So I was in the motor industry for a long while. I was selling cars. And yeah, I mean, even that, I don't know how they're doing that at this moment in time, but that's got its own challenges. So yeah, it was a massive change from selling cars, moving into finance, not just learning all the different rules and regulations, but taking exams after being out of education for so long, and getting through my diploma and then carrying that on to become chartered.
Oh, wow. So what was the motivation behind the move? Because like you said, it's a big change. You had to re-educate yourself.
So yeah, like I said, I sold cars for a long while, and don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. I love cars. I'm a bit of a petrol head. I enjoyed the interaction with people and the long-term relationships that can be built. I had lots of customers, friends, family, colleagues, who will come back and buy another car. But the motivation for the change was the hours.
Okay.
Because just before my first daughter was born, so how old is she now? She's just over 5. And I know sales isn't a 9 to 5 job, don't get me wrong. But I really wanted to get my weekends back, and not just for football, but just to spend time with the family. And selling cars, you're always going to be open at the weekend, especially Saturdays.
Of course.
So it's never going to happen. So while my wife was pregnant with our eldest daughter, I just decided, right, it's now or never. I enjoy speaking to people. What jobs in industry are you mainly building relationships, speaking to clients? And yeah, this sort of ticked all the right boxes.
Brilliant. So we have got a question that's sort of perfectly come onto the topic we're talking about. So did you use any skills from your job in the motor industry when you moved into finance?
Yeah. So when I moved from the motor industry, the training and skills that I had were dealing with lots of different people, and they could be from all walks of life. And yeah, you've got to be able to adapt in different situations. So that was a skill that I used, and just listening and communicating, because different types of people prefer different types of communication.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. Okay, so with the next question I've got, we're thinking back to education, but not where you re-educated, but going back towards school. So when you were in school, what was school like for you? Did you get good careers advice? Was there a careers advisor? How did it look like?
I enjoyed school, to be honest. Although, if you look back at old school reports, and when we were sorting through the loft and going through, like as you do, you go through old school reports and you look at things just to have a chuckle. It always read, George has the ability, but needs to apply himself better. So I don't know.
I'm sure that's common.
Yeah, I suppose I was Mr. Average at school. I wasn't sort of top of the class. I wasn't bottom. I just yeah, I suppose I could have applied myself better if I look back at it now. I enjoyed the social aspect of it. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed being at school. There wasn't any part of me that hated going or didn't want to go. So if I was talking to a younger version of me, I might have said be more focused, but I wouldn't particularly change anything.
That's fair enough. Go on, carry on.
Yeah. So with careers advice, I cannot for the life of me remember what roles the careers advisor suggested I do. I recall they put all my details into a PC or into a computer at that point, and told me what the results were. But I think now, for careers advice for pupils in school, I think it needs to be a bit more inspirational, if that makes sense.
Totally get you.
Because I just think if you're just putting details into a PC, then how is that advising a young person and inspiring them to push on, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. And it's obviously that's something that we try and do as an Enterprise Adviser Network, which I know that you've supported yourself as well. So hopefully that's the way that things are moving forward. But thinking back to school again, can you remember what you wanted to be when you were in school? And is it any different to what it is now?
It's completely different to what it is now. And this is why I wish I tried harder, because when I wanted to be an airline pilot.
Wow.
All I can recall is I wanted to be an airline pilot, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's too late to do that now, but I just thought, well, it's difficult to get the grades, but yeah, that was something that always appealed to me, just getting on a plane, going somewhere, being in charge of the plane, and then visiting different countries.
So a little bit different to what you're doing now, but
Yeah, quite a bit different. It'd be nice to jump on a plane now and fly somewhere hot, but yeah, maybe not in these strange times. I don't
I was
know.
going to say, yeah, maybe in the future. So you touched on a little bit around some of your day-to-day work in your current role. But can you tell us a bit more about the finance industry for anyone that's listening who's unsure or really keen to go in the finance industry? I mean, there's a bit of a conception at times it's all numbers. Do you want to give us a bit of an insight?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just numbers. Don't get me wrong, you need to be able to understand numbers and have a decent handle on it. But I think numbers come second. I think it's more about understanding client needs and understanding your clients and objectives, because every client and situation is unique. Like I said, one day you could be dealing with a company owner, and the next day you could be dealing with Mrs. Miggins, who's 80 and just been widowed. So it's two completely different conversations. Some cases can be technical, so you might need to be able to decipher complex information and take this information to explain it to a client in a way that they can understand it. This is mainly pensions and tax, and you also have to have a reasonable level of grammar to be able to read and type out reports and letters.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds really interesting, and definitely there's a wider skill set that is needed to go into the finance industry. We have got another question through, so I'll move on to that quickly. Have you made any mistakes that have turned out to be valuable lessons even? I'm really sorry, I don't know if George is talking or not, but I'm currently having some technical difficulties where George's screen is frozen and gone quiet. I'm not sure where the error is there. Okay, we are just working on getting George back to the conversation. Really sorry about this. Well, I'm sure most of you know, Wi-Fi has been quite horrendous over the last couple of days across Norfolk and Suffolk. Hopefully you're finding it useful so far. So we're just currently working on getting George back. I think he's just now rejoined us, so we'll just wait a second for him to appear back on screen. Hi, George.
Hi, I'm not sure what happened there.
Oh, I was just explaining it's probably the poor signal across Norfolk and Suffolk at the moment. I wasn't sure if it was my end or your end.
I don't know what happened. It just went blank. So yeah, I apologise.
Well, at least
that.
it shows that it's not, this isn't staged. It is a live show, and we can have technical difficulties. So unfortunately, neither one of us is IT gurus. So thank you, Ashley, for getting George back onto the chat. So the question we just had come in, I'm not sure if you heard it or not, but have you made any mistakes that have turned out to be valuable lessons?
Yeah. So being late for a client was a mistake that turned out to be a valuable lesson. In that, if I'm going to be late in the future, I will make sure I ring ahead to the client and make them aware, just not leave them in the lurch. And what other mistakes? I can't really. That's a good question. I can't.
Well,
really
let's
think.
face it. We all try and forget mistakes, isn't that right, George?
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Okay, no, that's a really, it's a really open and honest mistake as well. It just shows it doesn't necessarily have to be about a mistake in terms of the actual numbers or the finances, but in terms of the relationship building as well. Moving on from that one as well, are there any misconceptions around the sector you work in? I mean, I've already mentioned that there was a theory around it's just all numbers. Have you got any other misconceptions you can think of that your industry's been labelled as?
I think the main misconceptions are it's male dominated, and historically it has been, but now more females are moving into the industry, and also more females are becoming advisors, which is only a good thing, purely because some females don't want to deal with a male advisor. So the more females that we can have advising, the better it is for everyone. Beckett's subscribe to the Women in Finance Charter and have a 50-50 split of male and female across the board of directors and also staff in the office. So that will only help things as well.
Brilliant.
I mean, other misconceptions that I can think of are you need a degree or you need to be amazing at maths. I don't think either of these are true as long as you can apply yourself. And another misconception is historically the industry has had a bit of a bad reputation around sales culture.
Okay.
And now, not just through regulation, through various bodies like the FCA and but the sector has moved on and clients want more than just a transaction with their advisor. It's more focused on financial planning, understanding the client objectives, putting a plan together and reviewing that plan and making adjustments when necessary. So, and it's just trying to educate people because we've shifted away from that now.
So it's really good. It certainly sounds like a move for good as well, positive change. Moving on, we've got another question as well, which kind of, I guess, links a little bit. So do you feel it is important for young people in schools to understand financial well-being, and how do you feel it could help them? For
sure. Yeah, I mean, that is a great question, and it's so important for young people in schools to understand financial well-being, and just the basics. Just how does a bank account work? How do I get a mortgage? How does a credit card work? How does an overdraft work? What are the consequences of missing payments? What am I actually signing up to? And that's part of the reason why I joined the Enterprise Adviser Network, to go into schools and just teach students the basics. And I've been doing that with Jordan because, I don't think there's enough of that in schools. Not at all, really.
No, it's really important. And I think you literally it pretty much read my mind, because the question I was going to ask following on to that is, what do you feel you could do to support that to happen, but also Beckett's as a larger organisation as well? Obviously, I know it's very different at the moment, and I know we're looking at doing things virtually, but in general, how do you go about supporting that to happen?
Yeah, and I mean, if we weren't in COVID times, I would be going into the school, speaking to the students. There's activities that we can do, just to raise their level of understanding, because they don't get this education. Schools don't have it in the curriculum, and it needs to be started at a young age. So the earlier you can sow these seeds, the easier it becomes, and the more students take it on board.
No, that sounds really brilliant. The fact that you go in and do that as well, in your own time as well, or even within Beckett's time, it's still a real positive commitment there, and hopefully will benefit in the long run. Just moving on, just because I realise that time is slowly creeping up on us. So, what if a young person's looking to go into the finance industry? What skill sets would you say that they need to look at building? Is there any particular qualifications, any particular experiences they can gain? What advice would you give to a young person looking to get into the finance sector?
Yeah, I mean, you always sort of say, well, okay, do well at your GCSEs, get your A levels, get a degree. But as long as a young person can display the right attitude, you can teach and show them everything else, if that makes sense. So the right attitude to me looks like getting to work on time, being engaged with the job, being motivated to pass exams. If your employer or Beckett's, for instance, is going to put you through those exams, passing those exams, helping others, being part of the team, and just immersing themselves in the culture of the company. Because as long as the right attitude is displayed, I think you can mould that young person and show them how to progress.
That sounds like brilliant advice. Cheers for that advice, George. So we've got another question that's come through. Do you think COVID will have a long-term effect on how your business operates, moving to be more virtual and online? If so, does this require a different set of skills?
Aside from normal legislation, tax changes, that regulatory changes, the long-term effect, I think the industry will now be more digital, and it's already moving that way. There'll be apps that encourage younger people to save more, which can only be a good thing. I think artificial intelligence, and I don't want to get too sci-fi with it, and but there is robo-advisors out there, and you use it day to day when you don't even think about it, and I think that will play a greater part. Clients will be more educated, so they will be able to view and research information. Things will be more virtual, so there'll be more Zoom meetings, but it also mean companies can be more efficient using technology, not just for those Zoom meetings, but for storage, like we said, cloud storage, sharing information with clients. Banks have started with this, with open banking. I don't know who you bank with, but they'll probably have an open banking app, so client can see all the holdings across all the different banks or providers. So mortgage, you might have your mortgage with Halifax, you might have your savings with HSBC, but they all talk to each other. And this is starting to filter into the systems we use daily as well now. Okay. It's starting to filter through. So I think that moving forward, that's how I think it will progress. And then data security will be key. Because it will all be digital.
No, that sounds a really good insight, actually. And again, it just seems to be the way the world moving more virtual and online. It sounds like some real positive steps there. It's going to make it easier across all parties. So, as a new starter within the role, because this is going to be quite relatable to a young person that's moving into the industry as well, what sort of impressions do you think you should make in the workplace? And I know that you've kind of mentioned it a little bit, but would you have any advice around if you can't physically meet work colleagues at the moment as well? Anything further from what you said earlier?
I mean, when you start a new role, you always want to make as positive impression as you can in the workplace. Doing it remotely is challenging because you're not doing it face to face. So I suppose it's always best to ask questions, understand how you integrate into the team, and what systems and processes you can learn remotely, and have one-to-one meetings or webinars with your team so you can get to know them and they can get to know you, more importantly, and how you'll fit in and gel together.
No, that sounds really good advice again. And, it's very strange times. It might be the same moving forward. It might be different. That's the whole unknown. But it sounds like, you've certainly moved forward really quickly in these 4 weeks, and some really good advice for young people entering the world of work. Talking about your career as well. So what have been some of the highs that you've had in your career? What's been some of the lows? But on top of that as well, how have you dealt with both ends of the spectrum?
Yeah. So passing my level 4 diploma in financial planning to become a financial advisor, after being out of education for so long, that was a high. And I mean, that had challenges in itself in that I was still working. I had a young daughter. So yeah, it was juggling everything, and another daughter come along. So I've got 2 children, and she came along halfway through the diploma. So it was juggling family life, work life, and re-education. And now taking that step further to become chartered and carrying on with my exams. I mean, if I think back to selling cars, it was, I mean, I don't know if you're into snooker, but selling cars to Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I still speak to him from time to time now and selling to his family. I mean, he's a really funny character. I
get that impression.
And then thinking about lows, I mean, there was a tax module that I sort of struggled with, and I didn't pass the exam first time. And then dissecting all of that, trying to work out where you've gone wrong, trying to put it right, and staying motivated, because you've got to really be self-motivated. So yeah, I think.
How did you pick up that motivation? Because obviously you must have overcome it for the long run to be improved in terms of your qualifications and job roles as well. And so how did you build up that self-motivation again?
Because you've always got to have the end goal in sight. You just think, right, this is just a small obstacle I've got to overcome to get to that final objective. So this is just a hiccup. And as long as you can stay focused, right, what the end result is, I can keep the motivation. You just break it down into bite-sized chunks, if you like.
Brilliant. That sounds like a really, keeping that end goal in sight is a real key thing to do, and that's something I think young people need to bear in mind moving forward, whatever that end goal might be. I've got 2 more questions personally. So I know you sort of touched on a little bit that you wouldn't really change much from when you were in school. But if there was one bit of advice you could give yourself back to when you were 17, maybe, what would that bit of advice be?
Don't waste so much money on cars. Although some of those cars would be coming up to being collectibles now, so maybe I should have kept them. Don't be afraid to change careers or try something new. Don't pigeonhole yourself. It's probably something I'd say to my 17-year-old self. And I don't think a career is for life now, if that makes sense. Don't be afraid to try different things.
No, brilliant. That sounds like really, really good bits of advice there, George. The car one I think is quite different, but as a experience in finance, I guess you definitely know that that's a bit of advice you'd give yourself now.
Yeah,
So my final question, it might not be the final question if any others pop up, but my final
yeah,
question anyway is, what do you love about living and working, within Norfolk and Suffolk? Because obviously we have a real passion about the area. It'd be
yeah.
great to see young people succeed in Norfolk and Suffolk. What do you love living and working here? What about living and working here?
So the beauty and the green space that is on our doorstep. I'm really lucky to live where I live, be surrounded by fields, so I can walk out of my door, go walking across and not come across another person. It can be that remote, and it gives you time to think, time to reflect. And yeah, if I needed to, I could be in London in just over an hour. Just it's such a lovely place to live, and there's lots of great places to eat, lots of great places to visit, take the kids. I mean, I could list you so many different things that you could do. It really is like Felixstowe Beach. You've got everything on your doorstep. I mean, there isn't a better place to live, really.
And what about the working side of things? Is there anything in particular you love working within in Norfolk and Suffolk as well?
I mean, the people. Once you've got that relationship and that trust, people are really loyal to you. Is the word, the word I'm looking for. And they'll refer clients, they'll refer colleagues, friends, family. And once you've built that trust, it's that they're really nice people to deal with.
Well, that's a very a touching end to the question, George. That's really nice to hear, and it's great to hear that you do love staying local within the area, both living and working.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that is the final question, as no others have popped up on the screen either. So I'd just like to end off by saying a massive thank you for joining us today, George. It's been really interesting. Battled through the technical difficulties as well, which always throws in a bit of a curveball. But it's been really informative as well, which is really important for any young person that watches this. It's been enlightening to myself as well. But once again, massive thank you, and I'll see you soon, George.
Thank you.
No, see you later, George. Well, that's everything today. First of all, I just want to say a massive thank you to Ashley Ruthven for making all this come together behind the scenes, battling that curveball as well. She really does do the difficult part of the show. I just talk. So massive thank you, Ashley. Thanks again, George, for joining us as a guest. It was, really, really useful, really informative. And I'd strongly encourage people to look into the finance industry, even if they're not necessarily great in maths. And last of all, thank you to you guys for actually watching today. It's really powerful to have you guys watching this. We really hope that it's informative and helps you to make a decision. So following on from that, please don't forget to fill in the survey that's in the description. We want this to meet your needs. It's not about what we want. So unless we hear from you, we might not necessarily change things that you want to be changed. So please have a look at the survey and fill it in if you've got the time. So that's everything from me. Have a great week. Don't forget to join Jordan and Josie on Thursday for another episode of Careers in Coffee, where they'll be joined by a colleague from New Anglia LEP called Simon Papworth, who's an economic analyst. So if you want to find out more about what that is, I would really say tune in, because it's a very interesting role. Stay safe. See you soon.